And we are recording. First of all, thanks to everyone who is watching this discussion. We're going to talk about leveling up and character development in tabletop role playing games. As you can see, we have an all star crew here. We have Tyler. Tyler, are you still running Pathfinder?
Yep. Yeah. Quite a
Ah,
bit, in fact. Yeah.
and how's the
Looking at
campaign going?
great. We have one of the longtime players moving states soon, unfortunately, but that will. Mm, it's changed how the campaign is going to be moving forward in the near future, and I'm thinking we're wrapping it up pretty soon. That way, it doesn't. It's kind of hard topic for another day, but it's with long campaigns. I never really have like a set end date or end like goal for them. It's just sort of a feel thing, and I can feel like, okay, we're hitting the stride, we're hitting the good points. Let's end on a good note and not just drag it out forever and have a 40-year long campaign where it just feels like routine.
Yes, that's reasonable, definitely. Uh, and Max, for the first time on this channel, Max, are you running a game or are you participating as a player?
I was running like a Pendragon game. During the summer, we have to put it a bit on hiatus because like me and the people I'm playing with are very busy during the summer, working outside and stuff like that. So it's probably gonna be picked back in the fall, probably sometime soon. And other than that, I'm doing the playtest for my own game I'm working on. That's also take a big part of my hobby time. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Oh, that sounds awesome. What's the name of the game, or is it top secret?
No, it's actually like already for public viewing in a pre-alpha state. Like I put like a SRD out so people can sift through it and comment if they want. If you look in my video, I try to put the link for it. It's on a website there, so it's easy to see. The name is Winter Down. I also made a video where I can announce and I tell what I try to do and my goal. So you can find that on my channel as well. A first look at Winter Down.
Oh, okay, I see. For those of you watching, I'm going to put links to their channels in the description, so check them out. And Rick, you are starting your Castles and Crusades campaign, right?
Yeah, I just grabbed the book here so that everybody knew.
Uh-huh.
Castles and Crusades, yes, and we are playing in the world of Harn.
Harn,
Harn, yes. I have
really cool.
I
But
am
very expensive.
Yeah, I'm starting them in Rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it Rhythm, but a lot of guys call it Rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
It's the more evil area of the campaign.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's cool.
Okay, so just to set things, when it comes to tabletop role-playing games, no matter the system, if it's a class-based system, skill-based system, whatever, it's quite common to see the characters evolving, especially if it's a short or long campaign, the changes are quite noticeable. I have seen one-shots where you actually level up in the middle of the one-shot, one-shot depending on how long it is. But so I wanted to listen to Tyler's and Max's and Rick's thoughts on this. Max, how about you start, since this is the first time you are a guest in this channel?
Yeah. So I think like leveling up or character development, we should say, is obviously a part of a role-playing game. It allows you to play a character that, because like even in real life, we do get better at what we do with over time, hopefully. But I think also like people are oftentimes like myopic in their view of character development, and they focus a lot on like what is on the character sheet, and they forget about like the connection you make, the wealth that you accrue, but also sometimes the trauma that you get, that your character get, and stuff like that. There's a lot of like, you want the character to develop, you want your character to have an arch, not just the number get bigger. I think that's what's make character development, and that's why I say like it's more than leveling up. It's character development. You want a character to evolve as a person, as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can definitely see some obstacles, for example, in Call of Cthulhu or systems where you have a sanity system, like you mentioned. Sometimes you develop traumas, and sometimes players forget about that. They are losing sanity, they are experiencing all sorts of things, and they're like fresh, like in their first day of the scenario or the adventure.
Yeah, it's almost like an inverse character development in a way, and I find those can be interesting as well. And in Call of Cthulhu, it's like insanity and stuff like that. You can also have like physical trauma, like does your character lose an arm or stuff like that, and sometimes you can get better at something, but it's offset by other event that happen.
Now, Tyler, you mentioned something very interesting about one of your players, that he suddenly obtained this band to raise his intelligence from 6 to 12 or something. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, even on like a broader scale, I think a lot of the D20 systems, especially if you're doing point buy in the D20 systems, you run into the issue of nobody ever plays a charismatic fighter because charisma is a dump stat, but they never play that they're an uncharismatic character. Or maybe they just sort of always play uncharismatic characters because they generally aren't charismatic people. But yeah, dump stats in general, they're usually the sort of people who talk about dump stats are generally the ones that don't role play those poor stats. This character, Strongblood, he is a very powerful fighter. Interesting character in general, but just this specific, he was stupid. He had 6 intelligence in Pathfinder. Is like you struggle to form more than simple sentences. Like he just, but he wasn't incompetent. He was an incredibly powerful fighter, but that's just all he knew how to do. He only knew how to fight, and he played that through his character. Right? He's this sort of idiot that people are afraid to disagree with, even when he says something that's just obviously untrue, because it's like, well, I saw that guy just like cut a man in half, like without even breaking a sweat. So I'm not going to be the one to tell him he's wrong.
Let me interrupt, because that reminds me of a very funny comic strip. When everybody found out about Vin Diesel being a Dungeons and Dragons player, there is this comic book, I think it was from Penny Arcade, and the Dungeon Master was like, you suddenly encounter this monster and he hits you, and Vin Diesel starts to get really angry. He starts to sweat, and you see the veins popping in his the Dungeon Master. No, but he only dealt you 1 point of damage. Yeah, like please continue, Tyler.
But he had the wisdom he had average wisdom, right? He had a 10 in wisdom, so he, by being around smarter people than him before he joined the party, he was sort of a late addition to this long running campaign. He was basically alone with his companion, who really funnily rolled the exact same stats as him as far as intelligence. So he had no basis for how unintelligent he was until he interacted with the party, where we've got, very, very intelligent wizards, hyper intelligent, superhumanly intelligent. But he has the wisdom to realize, wait, I might not know as much as I think I know here. And then realizes, you've got items that can just make you smarter in an instant. Well, I'm gonna save up and buy one of those. And does that help him as a level 18 fighter in Pathfinder? No, not really. But it being intelligence obviously helps every character, but it led to him realizing a lot of things very rapidly. And I think what was interesting is not just him playing a smarter character, but now playing a character that went from being wiser than he was intelligent to being more intelligent than he was wise. So now he says, like, what are obvious truths to everyone, but he has just found out as a truth. Like, there's 2 members of the party are in like they're like in not a failing marriage, but in a really rough relationship, that their coping mechanism is adventuring. It's that's sort of 18th level. And as soon as he puts this headband on and he just says out loud what everyone's been thinking, is like, you guys have unresolved issues that you guys should look at therapy. And just creates this like really awkward silence in the group. Everyone's like, we know that, you shouldn't say it. Like,
I think that's something that a lot of players in D20 systems forget about. You have all of these attributes, and you forget it. If you have a fighter that is very intelligent or very wise or very charismatic, you should definitely put some effort in representing that. Although I did tackle that issue when I first started to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons about 3 or 4 years after I started to play. I immediately told my players, if you have high charisma, high wisdom, whatever, try to use that during battle if you feel like you are useless. And you will make a check, and maybe it will give you some modifiers when you are trying to trick the opponent or when you are trying to spot weaknesses. I always made it so. Now, Rick, what do you think about this whole thing about leveling up classes and skills and whatnot?
So, what I tend to tell my players is don't disregard that you have a sheet in front of you, and at the same time disregard that you have levels and everything. You know that you are slowly getting more powerful as you learn more things about your character. You learn more striking moves and stuff like that, like Castles and Crusades has. Although it's not as overbearing as something like 5e, where you've got all these things to pick and choose from, and it's just overwhelming to some people. I just and the way that Castles and Crusades is if a fighter wants to go ahead and try to disarm a trap or whatever, he may do so. He may roll underneath his, if it's underneath his dexterity, then let him roll. He will be rolling at a disadvantage, of course, not like his counterpart, the thief or rogue. But as they also advance, every time they gain a level, it adds to their ability to succeed in those roles. So there's that as well. But I try to have it not part of the game. We know that they are growing stronger, just like they are in Traveler. In Traveler, you're growing stronger in knowledge, resolving issues, understanding the universe as you encounter it. You're seeing new civilizations. You're discovering new things. And you're also discovering advantages that you can use against those enemies, or if they're your friends, you can use that. You can use just the knowledge, and even that knowledge is somewhat like a leveling up experience, like in Traveler. So to me, I try to go ahead and keep all that kind of on the low key. It's happening in the background, but I don't want it to be part of the game speak as you're going on through the game. I would I don't want the player to announce, "Oh, I'm a 5th level fighter," and blah blah blah. That is totally unreal. You want if you want to speak how good of a fighter you are, then hold your blade forth and let's see how good you are. Let's test your mettle there, youngster. That sort of thing, and you'll discover who is the better fighter and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my take, is to kind of keep it on the down low as far as in the gameplay sense, but we do know it's there in the background.
Yeah, so. I think it's especially true of fighters and martial characters and the like, because those sorts of improvements they're incremental. They're slow. You don't notice it when sometimes my historical European martial arts group meets only when school is meeting, because it's with the Oklahoma State University. So over the summer we don't meet, and then you'll notice like, hey, have you been training outside of the club over this summer? Because you've gotten a lot better. And sometimes it's like, oh no, I've just been, maybe they've just been watching technique videos on YouTube or something, and it's just that they already have the training, that it's just slow. But yeah, they're not walking around with a floating, "Oh, I see, you're level 5 now. You were level 4 before the semester when we met."
Yeah,
exactly. Like I for people that don't know, like I'm a lifting coach, and I often see like and even like in my experience in sports and stuff like that, I often see like that when it comes to technique, people get it in step. It's not that gradual for my because at some point like they try something, they don't get it, and at some point they do get it. There's a click that go in their head, and I'm sure it's the same in EMA. There's a technique, a certain technique, like a way that you're gonna go around with for a parry or for a feint and stuff like that. And somebody's gonna constantly doing it wrong, and at some point it's gonna do it right. Then it's gonna be a bit like iffy here and there, but then like that's it, he got it. Now he's gonna get it right every time. Is that the same in EMA? I get.
Yeah, it's true on like the micro level, right? Where like you can go from, well, here I'm just standing here, so I'll make the example with punching. You can make a proper punch is a proper punch, right? And then you have the wild haymaker. That's like one very clear step from point A to point B. But where it's more gradual might be, okay, they're starting to use lateral movement, but then once like pressure is applied, once maybe their opponent starts getting really aggressive, and then they forget that they can move left and right. They just revert to, because that's how everybody starts in most martial arts, I would say, is that they only want to move forward and back. They don't move left and right. And so
there's a thing we say, like under pressure, you're gonna default to the thing that you've done the most.
Yeah.
So that's why like when you need to train, you need to reps.
Yeah.
It also depends on the length of your limbs, because if you are much taller than the opponent, going back and forth actually works really good.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
In general, for example, more technical, it's better to sidestep. But yes, there is some opportunities to take advantage of the length. And it's funny because I was actually going to ask Max about that Max, you look like someone who does sports and all of that. So this is a general question to anyone now that Max has covered it. What do you guys think about those systems where you cannot level up or you cannot spend points on skills or spells or whatnot unless you go to a trainer? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So in the system that I'm working on, it's actually like that. But I don't have it just fully. You can't learn it by yourself, but it is much harder to be self-taught. Because I'm self-taught in most of my martial arts training, with the exception of karate. But I already have that basis of knowing sort of what martial arts work. And of course you can go, we have the online libraries here where you can cross compare. It's not as good as in-person training, obviously, but you can immediately test it and find out what works. So you can just improve by doing, but having an actual trainer who can tell you, not just, if you're just sparring with someone, you can do a technique wrong and go, oh, I got hit, so I must be doing that technique wrong. But you won't know how you're doing it wrong. You'll just know, well, it's wrong. And so you'll end up spending a lot longer, a lot more trial and error without that training.
I agree. But I think it's really complex, because there are some people that would say that when you start your RPG career, the campaign, with a first level character, that your character already knows everything, but he still doesn't understand some concepts. Or for example, the wizard that is still thinking about that formula. He doesn't know how to cast fireball because he still has trouble coming up with the right gestures and the intonation and all of that. And suddenly he goes up a few levels and I got it. And now he can cast his spells or whatnot. Now, Rick, Max, what are your thoughts on that, on the trainer aspect?
I think for me, it depends on the system. It depends how big of a step the improvement is. If it's a system where the improvement is much more gradual, like I don't mind if they do it, like if you gain a point there in the skill, like it can be in the middle of combat. And that's what I'm doing in Winter Dawn as well. Like, because it's like you improve like slowly. Well, it's not gonna be in the middle of combat because you gain the experience after, but like, it's gonna be much more gradual, but there's a little more granularity in the skill than if you're in a system like Dungeon and Dragon, when it's a big step every time you gain a level. Then I don't necessarily ask for people to go see trainer per se, but you need to have some downtime. You need to have like some time out. You're not gonna level up in the middle of the dungeon. You have to go back in town, spend some time there. Like there need to be like some time that goes by, so you can like integrate what you learn and try to perfect a bit the new experience that you have. Maybe if you want to go see a trainer, that I encourage it, like for a roleplay perspective. But I don't tend to demand it, but
Hmm.
some downtime that you can cogit about what you learn.
That makes sense. What about you, Rick? What do you think?
Yeah, well, for my Castles and Crusades game, I will express that there are people out there that will be able to train the others, the player characters, but that's all going to be within the role play itself too. So I'm not going to be forcing the players to go through like some sort of like you have to spend money and all this stuff. But the thing that I like about the Harn, the medieval aspect of that entire world, there are people there that are training and learning, and then the players come in. They'll be able to perhaps ask that trainer, "Hey, can you teach me that technique?" And the trainer will go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I will train you. I'll train you, but you'll have to owe me for I'll have have to have you sent out to do a errand for me." But we can go over the general idea of doing a double thrust to increase so now he'll be able to do 2 attacks per every second turn, right? And then the player will learn. Okay, he knows how the technique goes, but then he goes out and he adventures on. Maybe his first couple of times he has failed. I'll go by the rolls of what he's doing, and if he rolls low, yeah, you haven't quite got that technique down yet, and you play it out that way. And as the player has success in his rolls, you kind of integrated into the game that yes, you are becoming more and more masterful with your sword, and you are able to attack twice every second round, that sort of thing. But you, as a game master, you have to put in these things for your players to roll off of. If you don't tell them this, they have no idea. They're kind of like put in the position of, well, what do I do to become a better fighter or thief, or they have no idea. So you as the game master has to bring in these things into the game, however way that you're going to tackle them, be it training, or they have to go ahead and pay money, or whatever it is that you're doing. But for me, I'm just going to have them go through a little bit of a one-on-one with the master and learn the the technique, and they can go on from there through gameplay. So, but that's the thing, as a game master, you're the one who, your mouth as a game master is either your best friend or your worst enemy. Because you may say stuff that oh, I shouldn't have said that. There's that swamp over there and blah blah blah. Because naturally, the players are going to go to the swamp where you have nothing prepared. But the same thing goes with when you're kind of instructing the players through the role play, that there are these possibilities. Oh yes, if you wish to become a better swordsman, you must go see Jeremy the swordsman. He's great. He goes ahead and trains all the gladiators, and go check him out. You may have to go ahead and give him a few coins, to get some knowledge from him, but I recommend him. And the player goes on and plays it. So
I like the
that's how
I like the opportunity that opens too for the German masters often called them false masters. The people that are their name is known all throughout Italy or the lowlands or wherever, but all they're going to do is they're going to teach you how to get yourself killed. So there's that's something that the having trainers in the world or as a mechanic
even today it happens. Even today.
Oh,
yeah. There
I would
are
argue
some
more today.
there are some
Yeah.
there are some situations, as a guitar player, where I've met people that have just picked up a guitar and looked at what you did, and then they start playing it too. And I've met a couple of people that were like that. I'm just like, whoa, and they're just people that can just see and do exactly what you were doing. And some people take years to start, just forming chords on a guitar,
Dancers are that
yeah.
way. Dancers are my favorite people to teach because they can mimic movements like perfectly.
I was about to say the exact same thing. I coach a few women that used to be dancer. They're a charm to coach because they have like good understanding of how their body works. You tell them something, oh, put your shoulder blade together and down. They do it right away. Then they go on the bench and do it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So great dancer, do great powerlifter.
Yeah.
I think it definitely depends a lot on the system and the setting. Because, for example, Tyler, Rick, and I, we're going to start a campaign this Tuesday with the Infinity's Edge system. For those of you that do not know about that system, it's basically like a MMORPG sort of setting. And in MMORPGs, it's quite common to see the skills improving with each attack. You're constantly fighting and, oh, your sword skill went up by 0.5. And there is a way to handle that in the game. So I think it definitely depends on the system. And now that you mentioned all of those nuances, what do you guys think about reputation being a part of the leveling up system or the character development? Because as your character does things, he or she is going to build up a reputation, going to become more infamous or famous as the campaign moves along.
That's interesting.
This is something I like a lot. Some system actually do manage it in rules in game. Oh, sorry, was you able to get? Did I jump over?
No,
some
go
system
ahead.
like try
I was
to
just thinking aloud.
Some system like I've seen like system like Burning Wheel is a good example of that. You have like actually on your character sheet you have this thing called circle that are a resource that you can roll to see if you want to know somebody, and if you want to know somebody like higher up, you're gonna have to roll better. Then you can lower your score actually if you call in a favor. I might get some detail wrong here, like I'm a bit fuzzy and been a while, but sometimes I prefer like to be managed more through role play and to actually what you did. Some system it works. It's the same thing with like abstracting wealth. For some system it like depending what you want to focus on in the game. Like what is the kind of the story you're trying to tell with the player is about. Like, is that something that is warranted to be put on the side? Do we need to put more focus on that? So I've seen it work, but sometimes also I've seen it like that. It's almost more of an albatross around your neck than something that is actually useful. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's true. Go ahead, Tyler.
I agree. It made me think of the probably one of the most banned feats in a first edition Pathfinder, the leadership feat. A feat I actually like, but it does create this sort of strange situation sometimes where you hit level 7 and all of a sudden there's 100 people following you around. And I know why a lot of GMs ban that, because it can be tricky to come up with like, okay, if you're getting this as a feat, and Pathfinder is one of those systems where you don't have to have trainers teach you anything. It's just, this is a thing you have now by virtue of being level 7 and you've decided to take it. So it's one of those things where I would prefer to talk with the players and they say, hey, I plan on, going towards this, or they just role play it out and they're talking with people and
you plan on taking the feed, build it up.
Yeah, it gets built up, and so then the mechanics tie into the role play of like, okay, these bandits or whatever that you managed to convince to stop doing their evil deeds. Maybe you've converted them to your religion as a cleric or whatever. Well, now they're not just neutral. They're not just not attacking people on the streets anymore. Now they're following you. Something like that.
Yeah. It's gotta be natural. I think role play is what solves a lot of these problems that you find.
It solves everything.
So like you were saying, you could have, say, for example, if he's gotten to a level where he's going to start attracting people to his cause or whatever, all you really got to do as the game master is bring in a couple of characters that are familiar to the player, and then they bring in other people. They don't have to know every name, Tom, Dick, and Harry or whatever, but they do have their culture of friends around them as well, for each of those individuals joining up with the player, and that's going to kind of fan out, kind of pyramid out to a bunch of other underlings. So in other words, that the 700 people are suddenly, just it's basically a band of 5 guys with a whole bunch of other guys underneath them. So as the player, you don't have to know everybody's name, and you don't have, as the game master, you don't have to have all that, up and running for you. You just have to know the leaders that follow the player, and continue from there. But I think integrating it in as a role play kind of thing is key, because you don't want it to feel kind of awkward, like, oh, all of a sudden, poof, there's a bunch of people knocking at your door going, hey, we heard about you, James. We want to join you. Sure, you can have one guy do that or whatever. He'll be the annoying one that you're like, oh, why does he have to follow me, right? But you can integrate it in with role play. So that's a thing. It's a solid thing that makes it more believable by having that occur through role play instead of game mechanic.
Yeah, and I think the opposite is something that more DMs should do, which is just because the game system says you get a feat every so often, you get a skill every time you level up, doesn't mean that's the only time you can give them. I'll often give players feats or skills or something as a reward for doing something, right? You've got the equivalent of the leadership feat in people following you just through your role play because you went out of your way to attract this group. Well, okay, you have the leadership feat now. You didn't need to spend one of your 3 feats that you get from leveling up to get that.
I keep a tab on all my NPCs. So whenever somebody does something good towards an NPC, I kind of put a little tick beside it. And as they're increasing in ticks on how they react to that player, or decrease depending on if they're doing mean things to them, things are going to start going different ways during the role play. So that person that he's like lipping off every once in a while and disregarding, he won't be readily there to help the player later on during the game, where somebody else that they've been helping along and doing errands and stuff like that for them, they're going to be like, this guy's very trustworthy, and he's been very good to me, like doing the occasional errand for me. Yeah, sure, we can modify the price of this thing that you want or whatever it is. That reputation is going to increase or decrease depending on what the players do to each kind of NPC they encounter. So I think it feels more natural for me now.
You see, I mentioned at the beginning of this chat that I play Pendragon, and in Pendragon, actually getting glory is the name of the game. Like it's the goal of the game. You don't really gain everything you do gives you glory. You don't really gain experience. You can your skill can get better over time, but that's very marginal. What you're after is getting more known, getting a more renown, to maybe hopefully at some point be invited to join the round table if you really like doing the archery and the cycle with it. And it has a lot of impact in the game, because if you were invited to a feast, people are going to be called in the banquet hall from the lowest glory to the highest glory, because it's more glorious to be called last. If you go on tournament, it's going to have an impact. If you do everything you kind of do, your glory score is going to impact, but that's what you're after. So it's not just like a mechanic of the game. In a way, it's kind of the point of the game. And especially like your character is going to get better over time, but also it's a game that you're going to play many character, because you're going to play like the children, the son, the heir of your character. And this heir is going to inherit some of the glory of the father, because, he's the son of this well-known knight. So let's look at him, So there's this mechanic is very core. And that's what you do in the game. Every little action you do, you kill a monster, or you win a battle, or you gain glory. It's very like a big thing in the game.
I think that's why it's very important to get the board game or video game mentality outside of tabletop role-playing games, because all of that concerning fame, reputation, glory, it's not like it's going to happen just instantaneously. Like, I think it was in Dungeons & Dragons 3.0 or 3.5, it was either a druid spell or some sort of fate or animal empathy or something, where basically you were allowed to have like 100 cats following you around. but are there 100 cats around to follow you? Or like Rick said, are there people that are interested in becoming your hirelings, henchmen, and whatnot? It also has to make sense with the context. Now, the other thing that fascinates me is that reputation also has an impact in real life. And maybe you know about the gunslinger Doc Holliday, one of the most famous gunslingers. A lot of his fights had to do with the fear that he caused on people. First, I would say that if he had a character class, he would be a level 1 gambler. And he was terrible at both punching, fighting, fisticuffs. He was also terrible shooting. But as he got a bit more skilled and he started to build this reputation, and he also lied about his reputation. Historically speaking, he has lied about his reputation, saying that he has killed who knows how many people, and people started to believe him because he was skilled. He had tuberculosis, so he wasn't afraid to die. And suddenly everybody started to hear these rumors. And I think that in games such as Aces and Eights or Hackmaster, where you actually can use your reputation in a mechanical way to apply some penalties or reroll things and whatnot, that's also a way in which reputation affects everyone around you. It's also like a tangible way of measuring your level up progress. Now, another thing that could be quite interesting. Do you think that this process of leveling up from 0 to hero is more enjoyable, or perhaps neutral, or perhaps not so good when it comes to tabletop role-playing games?
I think it kind of depends on the flavor of things you're going for. I don't think enough people start their games at where they want to actually play at, and they sort of feel like they have to struggle through those low levels that they might not find enjoyable, just because that's how the book's written. That's how, oh, well, of course you got to start at level 1 because that's where else would you start? But likewise, I think it's if you're going to be running like a long-term campaign, you don't necessarily need to be running it in a system with mechanical advancement, because you can have the role play, the character-driven advancement. But it does just add to that, right? It adds a sort of skeletal system to that role play, if you like, where you are seeing, you can look back and remember, wow, 5 months ago, we were getting, absolutely destroyed by, these basic skeletons that this necromancer was summoning. And now, those, they couldn't even dent some of us. We can stomp them, no problem. So yeah, I think for me, I definitely prefer systems with advancement, not necessarily levels. I like the way that systems like Shadowrun 5th edition do it, where you get these incremental points that you can spend, and that way so you can save them up and have some sudden big advancements, or you can have those little gradual advancements each session or each job that you do. But yeah, likewise, like I said, you don't necessarily need it, but for me, I think it's a personal preference thing, and it's a what are you trying to achieve with your game? If it's going to be a long-term thing, I think you should have that advancement, yeah.
What do you think about advancement, Max? About this 0 to hero journey?
I think I find that what Tyler said is interesting, because he say like a lot of people don't start at the level they want to play, but I find like from what I've seen in the retailing that you see online, a lot of people seem to start at level 3, level 5, like the early level, or seldom played nowadays. Like people want to be powerful and they start powerful. And especially in a game with 5e, at level 5, you're actually quite powerful if you compare to the rest of the world. And for me, like the low level play is where the thing is the most interesting, like because you're basically a guy, you're a person. Like the more powerful you get, the less relatable you get in a way, because at some point you're not really like a human being anymore. So
Oh
yeah, he got paralyzed. Oops.
How dare he disagree with me? He's
Tyler, stop that now.
sorry.
Dare you speak ill of high fantasy? I can't stand for that.
Yeah. No, what I was saying, yeah, I think when you the higher, the more powerful you become, the less relatable you become as a character. As your character become relatable, it can get in the way a bit of role play. Some people like focus too much on what their character can do instead of who their character is. When you get a lot of power, it's a big distraction from who your character is. You know, what is his motivation, what is his goal, what is his interest, what is his personality. Basically, like, now you are a wizard that can cast fireball 5 times a day. You know what I mean? Like that's not really a character. It's a character sheet. And I found that in games like D&D, the power curve is way too steep. Like the difference between the level 1 and the level 20 is too big. I think there should be a difference, but I'd like it to be crunched down quite a bit to a more like, you should be able to become like very well known, like a legend, like you're the best fighter ever or the best wizard ever. Much more powerful than the level 1, but not to the extent of like you're basically a god. You know, I think at some point like you lose a bit. And what kind of adventure do you do with that? You know, like it becomes a little more complicated to keep a tone that where it's not just about like, oh, we're gonna go fight some dragons and then we're gonna go fight a Tarask, and you know.
I think it has a lot to do because Dave Arneson set that leveling up standard. A lot of people do not know this, but because Dave Arneson was experimenting with chainmail, he started with the whole concept of, let's level up and make the characters a bit stronger so that they don't end up killed in the first adventure. But it definitely turned into almost like a race towards godhood. I don't know, Max, if you have seen my Ravenhawk campaign, but in one part of the session, the level 5 characters, they basically have to confront Mordenkainen, one of the more famous wizards, and he drops them with a single spell. Drops everyone. So suddenly you feel like you're facing off against a god, and if you don't enjoy that, like just reaching insane levels of power, it can definitely be an obstacle in roleplay.
And it's especially become a problem, I think, with the in-game with D&D, where you always attack again at static AC, because like Tyler said, at some point the enemy cannot just ding you because like they're too hit and your AC is too high and stuff like that, especially when you have like magic item and stuff like that. Unless they get the critical, like they're not gonna touch you. So I think there's like I like when a low level enemy should always be a threat. Like at least in big number, like maybe not 1-on-1, you're just gonna crush them, but maybe if they come 5-on-1, then that should always be trouble, you know. I don't know.
For maybe I really like the Pathfinder has the troop and swarm rules, and it's basically if there's like a dozen or so of something, they just automatically damage you if they in their turn next to you.
Yep.
Like if they're one of these 12 dudes with spears is going to land a hit on you. That's just how it is. And of course, that's not something limited to Pathfinder. You can just logically rule that in games where it's like, okay, you're in because you know in medieval combat with how did a lot, if not the vast majority of people in full plate harness die, it was just from the press. It was just from thousands of people mashing into each other. The pure pressure just crushing them, making them unable to breathe, what have you. So yeah, if you have enough people there, eventually that can knock someone down a peg. But I really do like that. I kind of like that ability for the characters to get arrogant, to feel like, oh yeah, I do feel like I'm a demigod, and then be reminded, well, if you bite off more than you can chew, enough people with sharp sticks are going to remind you that you are in fact mortal.
Yes, I think that's part of Gygax's fault, because Dave Arneson always used to put emphasis on roleplay. So even if you have the highest armor class and who knows how many hit points, a stab in the dark could probably end up killing you. I think you should give priority to that. And now, Rick, what do you think about this whole thing, about the insane levels of powers and all that?
Well, I mean, if you're like, you have to kind of look at the scope of what you're playing. Are you playing a full-on campaign, or are you just playing like maybe a 3-session kind of thing? Because if you're just playing a 3-session kind of thing, your characters are kind of set at a certain kind of level, whatever you're playing them at, 1, 2, 10, whatever it is. You usually, as a game master, you kind of, gauge the threat levels and everything, and you kind of assess, what some. I always go with a little bit more danger on certain things. Like they can go after the dragon at level 2 if they really wanted to, that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's highly unadvisable. But you don't have to kill a dragon in order to get its treasure, though. There are certain nuances in the gameplay that you could probably grab a few bags of gold and make your way out of there if you're clever enough, that sort of thing. But with if you're looking at a campaign kind of view, I mean, it depends. It depends on what kind of, do you want to have, do you want to have these glorious little battles against dragons and stuff like that, or against gods, or players eventually kind of develop. I've had situations where my as a player had been at odds with another player's character, and we had developed into kind of like two kind of opposing forces. So in that kind of respect, you're also my power level against his power level. There's going to be although I was a fighter, he was a cleric, we had opposing views in certain things, and in some cases the the cleric said things to other NPCs to kind of stain my reputation as a player, and the game world evolves kind of around that. So I tend to have more of the, I'd like to have that more role play oriented kind of aspect around it, where you're not looking at everything as levels anymore. It's just you're to me, I think you have to pull that back a little bit and hide it in the background. You are this great warrior, or you're this great cleric, and it's, and you are expected to help people or whatever it is that you were doing. In some cases, the cleric was trying to help people, and he was gathering. He himself had followers and that sort of thing, and people that would talk to other people about what the cleric told about me as a player, that sort of thing. And then of course through the gameplay there's a big dynamic between our two players. Plus we were also going for other goals too. My character was trying to find the Baron's daughter in the case of the gameplay, where the cleric was seeing me as kind of like this, because I had been tainted with I had been cursed in the game. Because you've got all kinds of dynamics going there, and you're not just playing off of a sheet. There's just so much going on. If your game master is very dynamic in that sort of aspect, like giving these opportunities of really cool gameplay moments between the players opposing each other and stuff, there's tons of story in that you can exploit and generate as you're going through your adventure, through the campaign. So you're not only just going after the big bad guy who's got the Baron's daughter. You're also got these other forces that you're going up against from another player as well. And at times there were times where we had to be working together, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, wait till we get this done, and then we'll have it out, kind of idea. And so you have those kinds of moments where, but the thing is, the game master has to be part of that in order to make that all kind of happen, make it all kind of work as a story, to make it, evolve and stuff like that. So to me, I don't really look at that power level as a bad thing or some sort of good thing, whether or not it's it depends. Like first off, it's scope. Is it a one shot? Second off, is it a campaign? then of course, yes, then we're going to have a little bit of dynamics going on in here, and the power creep. To me, the power creep is moot because whatever level your characters are at, it's going to be from their character's point of view, anyways, all the way through.
Mhm.
It be you first level or be you 20th level.
Mm.
Just the stakes are bigger sometimes. I want to have bigger stakes when it comes to me being level 20. We're going after, God type, situations where we must stop the eternal elder god
Yeah.
from coming into our world, and you're going to be stopping that. Whereas
And when
first
it's
level-
more grounded like that, when you have those like inter party conflicts, then that's just sort of a personal issue. But when you're level 20 and you have that inter party conflict, now you're running into the like, well, both of us can tank a few fireballs in the middle of the city square, but what are you affecting beyond just yourself? So yeah, I think it really does. It is not just good or bad. It just changes the scope of things.
I think
Yeah.
also like when you're in those higher level, and like you said, Rick, yeah, you're gonna go like at some point, you're not just gonna go in the dungeon fight monster. You're gonna go, be involved in kingdom stuff, world saving stuff, and then like cosmic and planner stuff. But I think those arc can be good and interesting, but you can only them so much.
Oh,
Tyler, stop it.
Sorry, I want to hear on this one.
Sorry, I don't realize that how often can a character save the world? You know what I mean? Like at some point, it just become like silly.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a threat that threatens the world. The characters are high level. They deal with it. Maybe there can be some other repercussion that comes, so they have to deal with it again. Like they didn't completely defeat the enemy, or there was somebody else, and then maybe it leads to something like even higher that everybody like the common of the mortal is not gonna know about it because it's a different plane. Now you're fighting against God and stuff like that. Then after that, your character is done. You did all you got all the story you could from that character. It's time to retire him.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I meant earlier when I was saying like you can tell when a long campaign is like it's ready to end because you don't want to, you have some of those. I like shonen anime occasionally, but there's some where you can tell they just drag it on for too long, and it's like what were villains in the first season are just like totally laughable now, and you look back and it's like, what are we doing now? We're like punching through time and space, and like I can't. It's gone so off the rails, ridiculous that it's just like, and it's not going to be the last season because they still want to make more merchandise and money off of it. So it's like, oh, where do we go from here? The human mind can only comprehend so much power.
It seems the more successful animes are the ones with the with where the characters are at odds, like Goku and Vegeta. That's why that carried on for so long, is because you knew that these characters were either fighting on a common ground, but still adversaries. They were still competing against each other, that sort of thing. You get the same thing with JoJo, and his bizarre adventures and stuff. You've got the enemies coming in that sometimes they will work together in order for a common good and stuff like that. But that's the thing is as they are growing in level, they can also be part of that dynamic. But at the same time, the story of Hercules, how far did that go? He did his, and then it basically ended. Hercules did what he had to do, and his story ended, and he was known forever, as this, this person, this immortal that some people look up to and tell stories about. And that should be the same thing with your characters, if you're going for that, campaign stuff.
What you say there, Rick, about this Goku and Vegeta and like being about character, that's something that is an essential truth when storytelling. People care about story about characters. Like people sometimes, especially in fantasy, in science fiction, people make those cool world and they want to show the world, and they make the story about the world, and the character are just there to like. People are not going to relate to that. If you want to have a great story, make it about the characters, not about the world, not about the fiction, not about like, oh, look at those, wouldn't be cool. Look at those cool idea. Nah, you show that through where the character evolved, but the character needs to be the center point of the a little
Mhm.
tangent there, but like you just said that like that, like, oh, those story that stick are about character, man. That you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and like the scale, I think, says more about it tells you more about the world than it does really about the characters. Where if you have a sort of more grounded, lower level, grittier thing, that may tell you that the world it's a harsher place, it's a more gritty place. Whereas if you have on the higher fantasy level of things, well, if you've got a bunch of wizards running around and at level 5 they can create infinite water and infinite food, this world's probably not the worst place to live. It's probably or if it is a bad place to live, they don't have the same issues we do, right? They don't have the problem. They're not worried about, the peasant isn't worried about where his next meal is coming from. The peasant is worried about the I don't know, the displacer beast eating his entire herd of cows overnight or something like that.
Now,
Yeah,
here's an interesting question for the three of you. What about a situation when instead of leveling up, you are remembering or recovering things? Are you familiar with Elric of Melniboné from the Elric saga? Yeah. Well, for those of you that aren't familiar, he oftentimes, instead of gaining powers, he is remembering things, remembering spells. Or sometimes he's dealing with his chronic condition. He has a sort of like a disease, and he constantly has to obtain herbs to keep himself healthy. But when he obtains Stormbringer, his famous sword, now he can steal the life force from others. But you could say that Elric isn't exactly leveling up. He's kind of like remembering things or recovering things from the past and also dealing with his ailments. And suddenly he becomes stronger because of that. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's a super cool way to do advancement because you're also solving the problem of 30-page backstories at the same time. Because as you level up, you can go, I remember this thing that I didn't even have written down before, but now I can go, this would be interesting. Even if you're just picking something out of, that's a nice mechanical benefit, I would like to have that. They can then make you think, okay, why did this character have that, rather than just, it'd be nice to hit people better. What did they do? What did they do? Say you take, a fairly basic feat like improve disarm in Pathfinder or something, then you can think of like, I'm remembering, my time I spent with an old sword master I'd completely forgotten, who had this special disarming technique that, I repped hours and hours of that now I've gotten that back. So it helps you build in the backstory. I've run one game like this where the players were all prisoners in like a super powerful magical jail where basically the villains that were too powerful to be put into a normal prison, they would just escape, were put here and they had their powers drained from them. So they were normally like level 15 or so Pathfinder characters and have now been brought down to just being level 3. As there's this like field of amnesia and sort of Harrison Bergeron vibes, if you know that short story.
Yes. Now, when it comes to that, I was just thinking, I think it is sometimes much better to have like a horizontal progression. I thought about that because of the shonen anime that you were saying. I think the pitfall of many shows, even video games and whatnot, is that they focus too much on going up instead of leveling up sideways, so to speak, so that they have more options on how to take on the different enemies. I actually enjoy those adventure scenario situations in which using a power in a clever way is more common than just how would you say, overpowering everything. That now I can punch harder and I can punch even harder still. But now, no, it's I learned this other ability and I used it at the right time and I obtained this result. What do you think about that?
Yeah, not to just steal this, but just real quickly, that's something I like about Shadowrun's. I forget what they call the mechanic, but limits where your gun can only be so accurate. So you may have a 10 in pistols, but the 1911 you're firing its limit is 5. So if you score 6 hits, well, you as a shooter are more accurate than the pistol can possibly be. So that encourages you to, as you're getting points to spend and you're upgrading your skills, either you need to get a way better pistol, but that might be cost prohibitive. And so it encourages you to broaden your horizons and put points in multiple different things where it's like, okay, well, I've already, starting the game, I've already maxed out the technology that we have. So there's no reason to just keep, getting better and better. It's pointless.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost also like when you're saying like about a power getting used in a more clever way, that's almost like a player level up than a character level up. Like the player gets to know their character better, know what they can do, and think of novel way to use the power that are available to them. And I think that's valid as well. That can be also fun in a game context. It's a bit meta, but I allow it.
So yeah, one of my the character that I was talking about, my fighter in this game that I had played for a very, very long time. One of the things was he didn't, sure he had, and this is a second edition AD&D at the time. But you also have to keep in mind you also gain magic and different magic items as you're adventuring, and the way that you use them can be influential in how you're. So, for example, my character Valgar, he obtained some boots of levitation, and he also obtained a ring of featherfall. So, if you can imagine this fighter with a flaming sword that is able to go ahead and climb up a tower, evading his people behind him, and running off the edge to fall, and then feather fall all the way down. And then in other cases, maybe I need to escape through that to that tower up there, boots of levitation. So there's a lot of different things that your characters can do in a D&D kind of sense, which isn't power based as far as your leveling up goes. It also has to do with the items that you obtain during the gameplay. So, strangely enough, the other players were, at the times that we obtained treasure and stuff like that, they were like, oh, well, who wants this, ring of featherfall? It's kind of useless. One guy would just I'm like, I'll grab that, and I'm thinking three-dimensionally here, it's those situations where I'm making my getaway through, like in a higher up and using it in certain situations. So I always thought, that there was always a use for these different magic items. You just have to think, in a different kind of perspective than what
in a creative way.
Yeah, creative way, right?
Because the plus,
and that's part. Yeah, that's part of the gameplay too. It's having these items, and the cool thing about as you're getting higher and higher up in level, it's not just your abilities; it's what you collect and what you use creatively. Yes.
Yeah, it can be tempting to get the +2 sword and just be better at fighting because you're a fighter, but then that +2 sword's not going to do you a bunch of good if somebody pushes you off a cliff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's also
Max,
like
I'm curious. In Pendragon, do you have many magical items, or are they extremely rare?
They're extremely rare, and they're often like somewhat minor, like in their effect. And sometimes it's just like social effect, they're shiny or they're known, like even Excalibur, Excalibur is pretty decent in what it does, but you're gonna get more benefit from like invoking your passion and your virtue and stuff like that, and your trait that is in your character. So the magic item, they're not, and because it's fairly low fantasy, there is like some special monster and stuff like that. Merlin is there, but people don't run around with like flaming sword and flying horses.
Okay.
Which
What
is
were you
one thing
going
I
to say?
like because I'm very like a low fantasy kind of guy. Because like I said, I want to focus on the essential, on the character, on the person, and stuff like that. So taking away all those things, like now you don't think of your character, and especially when everybody's a knight, everybody's human. Now you don't think so. Basically, you're all the same on that level. So tell me who your character is from there, and you cannot just say I'm a human fighter because that's everybody. You just told me nothing. So you have to go a little step deeper, and which is one thing I like.
Hmm. Now, I think this is somewhat rare in most situations, but how many of you, either as players or as game masters, how many of you have you seen players that properly role play that advancement, whatever it may be? It could be through acquisition of riches or items or levels or whatever. But sometimes players like they forget to represent that. Or have you had any positive experiences where you said, "Oh, that player represents the changing psychology or emotional changes because he has experienced this or that, or now he has a greater sense of responsibility or whatnot." Have you seen those situations, or have you role played those situations?
I've seen
I
those situations. Oh, go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, I was just going to say the first thing that comes to mind is I have a player in my long running Pathfinder campaign that plays an Oracle, which the Oracle class I think is really interesting because they're like a cleric, but they don't pray for their powers. They're just chosen by a god, and they get a curse and they get their powers. And this player is playing a very young Oracle. They're like 24, I think, and they're level 18 at this point. Because all of their power is just given to them by this combination of a curse and by the whim of whatever god. And she's really frustrated. She feels like the group that they're in is tackling these really big issues, and she has realized that she doesn't really, she's adventuring to make money, to make a good living for herself, to find out. And eventually, at like level 18, she's like, okay, I'm just going to try to commune with the gods and see what one answers. And it talks with them and is like, when am I going to be, when am I finally going to be, enough for this? And they have this conversation of like, you can wave your hand and make people dust. What do you mean? And has like been playing that this character doesn't realize how powerful they are because they've just been wrapped up in the mundanity of what they're doing. It's adventuring, doing what they're doing is a job for them. And they haven't realized like how far it's gotten.
It's part of the game master aspect to kind of drive that point home to the character as well in some situations like that. I had a game where my friend Jay was playing a wizard. I put together this little situation. It was a house which had been burnt down. It was a cursed witch or something. I can't recall what it was, but that had owned this place, and it had been burnt down. And they entered the burning remains of this ruin, and I had put in this doll in the corner of the room, and this doll is a cursed doll. So whoever grabs the doll, they become symbiotic with it. And I had no idea which of the players, we had about 5-6 players in this game, but it just happened to be my friend Jay who's playing a wizard. And I think they were about like second, third level D&D second edition. And Jay said he took the doll, looked at it, and he's like, in typical Jay, he goes, "Oh, yeah, it's cool." Throws it behind him. And as soon as it hits the wall behind him, I say, "You take 2 damage." And he's like, "Ooh." And now that became something for his character to latch onto and evolve with. So now he had the curse of the doll. So So now he had to take care of the doll and keep it in his backpack and stuff. And at times he was like trying to figure out how to get rid of this curse. But at the same time, it was becoming a part of his character as well. So, as the game evolved, it became a part of his story, within the scope. But it takes the game master, the game master has to put in, things like that and make things, happen that way so that players can, you know, um, relate to it and understand their how frail or how powerful they are in those situations. So yeah, just like you were saying, that person could turn somebody into dust with the wave of their hand, but it takes an NPC to tell the player, to say, hey, you realize how truly powerful you are,
Yeah.
and,
You've only ever
kind of
been fighting other people that powerful, really, so you don't know how you are compared to the regular person. Yeah.
exactly, and yeah, to put that into context for them, they're like, oh yeah, right, yeah, maybe we should be going after this big
Yeah.
bad, right?
I don't just go around vaporizing random peasants. That's right. Yeah.
I've seen player like have their character retired after a big score, which is sometimes
Mm.
that can be annoying. But if that fit with the character motivation, I like that. Like your character was just in there for the money. At some point, you had like a tough adventure, a lot of injuries, but you managed to get out with the bag, and you say, "I'm out, I'm done, guy." And I think that's a way to roleplay a character. That's a way to roleplay character development, even though it's not like getting power; it's getting wealth. It's gonna change you. Maybe is it enough wealth, or you like at some point you have to wonder why you keep and you can have the same thing with the reputation. If your character was about getting famous, getting well known, getting some social standing, at some point there's gonna be a point they might want to retire. You have to have a reason why the character keep going out on adventure. Sometimes they can retire and can be brought back out of retirement later on. That's also something that can happen.
Exactly.
I also seen character uh, develop like hatred and phobia for a specific type of enemies, like if after a big fight, stuff like that. I think that's also interesting to add on. Like it's part of the I've seen those kind of character development being role played. I don't know if that really answer your question. Like even in Pendragon, you have like a passion that is hatred of a specific enemy that you can gain after a fight and stuff like that, and then you can invoke to get some bonus when you fight those enemy again. You can lose at some point. Anyway, there's a reason why I'm a big advocate for this system. Like I think there's a lot of cool thing for role play in it. But I don't know if that answers your question. But like those are kind of examples that I often see when you're people that actually can role play and do think about who their character is, what their motivation is, what their goal, what push them forward, and also what the character goes through. I think that's something that should be considered as a role playing. I've seen some people like turn to kind of like be corrupted by the power, having the character like "Oh, I'm getting more powerful," but then they like, and that's cool to see when you're a game master as well, when they don't tell you outright, but at some point you kind of catch up what they're doing, like they're tweaking the personality, and then you confront them at some point, like just after the game we talk, and it's yeah, like I'm doing this power corrupt kind of thing, you know what I mean? So I'm going there. That's an amazing type of role play. I've seen a player do that. I was pretty pleased with that. It's like because at some point I say, hey man, I like after a few sessions, yeah, like I realized he was doing that, and I told him after the game, and so I hope that doesn't bother you. I say, no man, that's fucking cool.
Mhm.
Go ahead with that.
Something I do that I haven't noticed other people do, I guess, in this specifically, is paladins in I think every edition of Dungeons and Dragons since 3.0, they get immunity to fear at a certain level.
Mhm.
And I thought, that's weird. That's like all of a sudden, this guy just goes into combat, just dead stare. His heartbeat hasn't risen at all. Like he's going to notice that. And like whenever you go into combat and you're used to the adrenaline dump of, and just all of a sudden you're like, something's weird here. They usually have the talk with the party afterwards of like, did you guys feel that? It's like, feel what? It's like that, you could just charge at them, and if you died, that would be okay. And they're like, are you all right? Like, it's a weird thing to have happen to you all of a sudden.
I interpret that as being either two things. One, in the more like Saturday morning cartoon, kiddie-friendly thing, that perhaps they experience that fear and they immediately overcome it, like, and this still keep on going. The other side of the coin is that perhaps paladins are a bit like monsters, trying to portray themselves to be something else, because in order for you to overcome the greatest evils, you also have to be something else, something supernatural, perhaps. So perhaps they could be called or referred to as divine monsters, because someone who doesn't fear, what?
I always think of it as sort of the gods are you're a tool, you're a mortal tool of a god. They don't need you to feel fear. They're you go and kill my enemies, and no hesitation. We can't have hesitation here. And now that you're strong enough, you can't have that at level 1, because you would be useless if you didn't feel fear at level 1. You would just go off and fly off cliffs and die, whatever. But
yeah, it's good to have a good game master to add the reasons why, because you become attuned with your god, and the god is providing you with the strength and the what would be the opposite of fear. I can't more confidence. Yes, having the confidence behind the god, knowing that whatever happens, he will be either remembered by and become a part of the god's divine afterlife kind of idea. So yeah, you have that, but once again, you got to have a good game master to present that for the player, so that he or she feels that as part of the game. That's a thing. The game master and the players really have to work together in order to make the reality kind of conform to what they're trying to do. So it's not just players, and it's just not the game master. It's got to be definitely. It's got to be a combination of both.
Yeah, and likewise from the game master, something with progression. I see a lot of the times game masters just say, "Oh, you're level 7. You're only ever going to fight level 7 stuff now. Oh, you're level 8. You're only ever going to fight level." And it's just so you don't. There is progression, but it doesn't feel like it. There is, because it's like everything's just as hard as it always was.
It's like in Skyrim, when everything's scaled with your level.
Yeah.
I hate that. Yeah, Skyrim.
Yeah. That's always something like you're gonna encounter what makes sense to be there at the time. Sometimes I might play with the number a bit. Instead of being like 5 bandit, it might be 12. So I, like, make it a little bit more challenge, but it's not gonna be like suddenly like a much stronger like level 5 bandit, because the world need to make sense in a way, like the world is just not a playground for that exists. Like, the world exists for its own sake. It doesn't exist just for the player, to evolve in.
Yeah, my level 18 players ran into like a group of like 20 goblins that were there since the beginning of the campaign the other day, and I was like, they have not been leveling up as much as you have, so that's not really. I don't really need you to roll initiative. What are you doing?
What do you do? Oh no, that's forbidden. What do you do?
I'm thinking it, not.
Okay. The antidote for Skyrim is Gothic. I don't know if you have played that one. Gothic. Yeah,
I know about it, but I never played it. It's one that I skipped my radar.
Play it at least once. You're going to run into situations where there is simply no way out of them. The enemies, the hazards, they are too strong. And if you level up a bit, then you will encounter situations that are too easy. So you feel like there is a reality to the world.
Yep.
Yes, definitely. But now I got me thinking about all of this talk about the advancement. It also makes me think that you do advance or make progress in certain aspects, but other aspects of the character also suffer or change quite a bit. There is a tabletop role-playing game that is kind of like a street fight sort of game, like the Warriors, or in video games like final fight that is called Fight to Survive. I don't know if you remember that one. In Fight to Survive, there is a very interesting level of advancement, as you're basically a street fighter, not necessarily a competitor. You're just trying to survive in an awful city. So as you fight, you're going to be experiencing broken bones, torn ligaments. You're going to be suffering psychologically. When I was reviewing that game, I am still reviewing it because I do my reviews in parts. At first I thought, no, this is very, very bad, because there are many martial artists that go through life and they don't suffer everything. But in the way of portraying the everyday life person that is trying to become a better fighter, trying to survive, sometimes your body is going to stop working the way it is intended to. Maybe you have improved in your techniques, you have obtained more resources, you have met lots of people, but suddenly, eventually, either your body or your mind is going to break down, and that's when the character needs to retire, and you, the son, the pupil, the student, takes over. So it's kind of like a generational situation.
Yeah.
There's
Just
something
like
about
Ben Askren. You know who Ben Askren is?
Not me.
Yeah, he's
MMA
a wrestler in MMA.
MMA wrestler guy. Yeah. And yeah, he started breaking down. I was watching a video on that, and it was like his hips were, by the time he got into UFC, he was like in his 30s, and he knew he only had like a few fights left in him, so he wanted to make sure that those fights were going to be the ones that were going to propel him to the top, because in one and in Bellator, he had been at the top, in the peak. He was like the welterweight champion in both of those, different whatever they're called, outfits and organizations. So he realized his hips were going, so he only had a little bit of time before he would need a hip replacement and stuff. Unfortunately, things didn't go the way that he wanted it to go. He ended up getting defeated in UFC. But yeah, you have to realize, even the best, and he was really good in both of those organizations. But when he finally got to the point where other people were more youthful and had other ways to defend against his tactics, suddenly there was, he had to kind of step down and say, "Hey, that's it. That's all I can do."
That's a good point, actually. Something I hadn't considered until you just mentioned it. But the idea of the people you're fighting not necessarily getting better, but just learning how you fight. Because that's one of the things. Askren was really, really good at wrestling, but he didn't really adapt his wrestling to MMA. He was just so good at wrestling that he could just make it work for MMA. So one of the highlight losses for him, he lost a round in 9 seconds because he shoots for a blast double and just gets flying kneed in the head, and that's it.
That was it. Oh, yeah. One of the fastest knockouts in MMA history.
Yeah. Jorge Masvidal was like, he's going to come out and he's going to shoot for a blast double, because that's what he does. He's a wrestler.
They were saying he was practicing that knee for weeks on end, because he knew that this is how Ben Askren comes in.
Knee skill levels up.
Yes.
Yeah. But and those guys can also, when they retire, often become coaches. I don't know if you know the great Billy Robinson.
Yes, of course.
One of the last catch wrestling greats. He's walking around with a cane at 70-something, still teaching catch wrestling, right?
Yeah. Even Bas Rutten is still going on out there. Yeah, he's the old commentators. Yeah, he's he was in Pancras for a long time, and
George St. Pierre.
Yeah.
There's something to because like first, like in MMA, like often I guess it's a sport context, so like there's also like there's some safety concern for the athlete. There's always like a ref, and they can stop the fight if it becomes too dangerous. When you're in fighting with sword and stuff like that, fighting for your life, you don't have that, so there's gonna be like more risk of injury, of lingering injury. I think that's a good thing. And also like I don't know for you guys. I don't know Tyler. Maybe not Tyler. No, Tyler is young, but like for me, like was really when I passed 35, I noticed like, well, I slowed down a lot. My body takes longer to heal. I need more rest to recoup from my AV training session. You know, I really saw the difference at that point. Like it's not that old, but then you have to find other way to compensate. Well, I need to be smarter. I need to be more technical, or I need to or find other way to be useful. I think that's something that a character can do as well. And I like those characters that maybe like I said in the beginning, maybe you did lose an arm, maybe you do lose an eye, maybe you did, and stuff like that. But you gain experience. Now you're valuable. Like you're not as good as to fight as you used to be, but you're still very useful because of your expertise. Because like you know how to recognize we're coming close to a goblin encampment. You know what I mean? Get ready. I have a plan. That's how we're gonna do it. You know, I've been watching Better Call Saul now, like, and there's a lot of scene with Mike Trout, which is clearly older, but you see he's very wise.
Oops. Oh no. I'll have to wait a bit.
He needs those chipmunks to be working on the little treadmill.
Yeah, on the...
getting his internet going.
I think he's taking quite a while.
Yeah.
Well, yes, go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say, do you have a real interest in that Elric, Abe?
Mm-hmm.
You have an interest in the story of the Eternal Champion and stuff like that?
Uh-huh.
Have you looked at the Strange cipher system? The Strange.
Yes, I have. I have.
Okay, that reminds me so much of the Elric and the Eternal Champion concept in that entire
cosmology.
Yes, in the role-playing game itself. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that to you since you were.
Yeah, no, I like it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
What were you saying, Max? Because you got cut off.
Oh no!
They won't let him talk. These damn machines won't let him continue.
Abe, it's because he has Starlink. They know your comments about elongated muskrat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Max,
Elon Musk. Yeah. I was saying like a character, like an older character, can become like find other way to become useful to offset if his physical attributes decline, or if you get like lingering injury and stuff like that, and that can be an interesting story as well. And sometimes it can be like more resolve or more grit. Like people sometimes joke about like dad strength. You don't want to like the old guy. Like, yeah, he might not be as biff, but you don't want to fuck with him because he's gonna kick your ass. When you're 16-year-old and the dad come, like the 45-year-old dad come.
Jack Dempsey, the world championship boxer, he got mugged in his like 70s and knocked out 2 dudes. Like, because they go, 2 young stupid robbers go up and are like, oh yeah, let's mug this old guy, and that was it.
That's an interesting point. I think I wonder if you could easily integrate this into an RPG system, but oftentimes that old guy that is still pretty skilled and very tough and all of that, it also has a lot to do with how you take care of your body. Because like I mentioned in a somewhat recent video, I don't know if you heard about Joseph Greenstein. Yes, of course, the guy who took, you can check it out in Google it if you don't believe me. That guy took a bullet at point blank range to the head and it bounced off. And he got knocked unconscious, and he was pretty old. I don't remember if he was like 40 or 40 something, I think. I need to check that out. But even still, when he was 50, 60, he was still breaking nails with his teeth, breaking chains and driving nails with his bare hands. So I think it would be interesting to try to implement a role-playing game system where you have like the perfect diet and the perfect exercises to the point that you are no longer affected so much by age.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say that's an interesting point because I know like Ramsey Dewey mentions that a lot on YouTube because he said that he's like, yeah, now that he's into his 40s, he's in the best shape he's ever been in, right? Like he's and you know, it has to do a lot with we're starting to find out that it's like, yeah, your peak strength, you actually don't reach it until like late 30s, early 40s is like peak theoretical strength. And I know a lot of the Chinese sports institutions are doing a lot of study on the myofascial tissue that can be even if someone doesn't look super strong, like that's a lot of where the old people strength comes from, is not just obviously the knowledge and whatnot, but that the strengthening and all of that connective tissue. So yeah, that's interesting to think about.
There's a lot of your central nervous system has a lot to play as well, like because oftentimes the body can do much more than what your brain tell you that you can do. So if you can like override that, that's something that you can get better at over time with age as well. Yeah, and it's I think also like that's something really like the older you get, the more discrepancy can be like between two individual, like how much they age, basically. Like you can look at 250-year-old, they're not going to be the same at all. Some one of them like is going to look like 10 years younger. It's going to be much stronger, much healthier. Like yeah, how you take care of your body, I think that'd be like a pretty important factor. But when you play adventures that are always like on the go, always facing danger, stuff like that, I think it's often kind of assumed that you're gonna be kept just by your daily activity in a state of peak performance or like high performance.
That's what I was thinking when I was reviewing the Fight to Survive. And at first, like I said, oh no, I don't like this system. But then I thought, these are people that are trying to perhaps blue collars or working their everyday lives. And sometimes they can only drink soda and they can only drink their hot dogs and fast food. And that's also going to take a toll. So I think it makes sense with what Max is saying as well, that the lifestyle of the character is also going to affect that.
Now I want to play a druid that was like a traveling nutritionist for the party or something.
That's a lot of interesting things that you can do with the party dynamics there. Because I did a review of a movie. It was called Flesh and Blood with Rutger Hauer.
I haven't seen it.
And have you seen it?
No.
Oh, okay. So there's a character in there. He's a cleric, and he's the cleric of the group. So he actually played the one of the guy with the glasses in Indiana Jones when they opened up the Ark of the Covenant and everybody started melting. So the same character, but he was playing a cleric, and he ended up taking Martin, who was the leader of the group, and calling him Saint Martin, like going through uncovering, this old statue in this
temple.
It was a ruined castle that they inhabited, and he pulled out this old statue of Saint Martin, and because their leader was named Martin, he kind of said, well, look, the gods favor you and stuff like that. And the thing is, a lot of clerics in D&D, how many times have you seen them trying to convert the other players, like, or actually influence the other players, because their power is coming from this god. So therefore, you must, acknowledge that this god exists because it is helping you heal and everything. So there's a lot of party dynamics that are missing in a lot of D&D games and stuff like that, because the players aren't considering this, and the dungeon masters aren't considering this either. So once again, I'm saying, the players and the dungeon masters, they must all kind of work together to make this world kind of, gel and become believable. And there are certain things you can do, taking ideas out of that from certain movies and putting them into your game as well.
I actually like the way Big Bad RPG is role-playing the cleric in the Ravenhawk campaign, because he first started with a very mercenary style of mentality. He was just like a mercenary, and Paylor is granting me powers. But when he later finds out that he's kind of like a chosen one of the Morning Lord, Now if you notice him, he's constantly like trying to what ails you, my friend? He's trying to become a bit more serious about the whole clerical thing. What were you going to say,
Cool.
Max?
I was saying like the spiritual aspect of a character is often like not considered, and I think that's fairly important part of like everybody's personality. Like we all like have a spiritual component. Even people that are atheists and stuff like that, they're gonna hook up to some other thing usually. Like we see that in the world, but I think it's important to consider in your character as well, and especially when you play in a medieval kind of setting, and especially when you play in a world when there's a lot of miracle happening and stuff like that. You know, your character is probably gonna have some kind of spirituality. I think that's a good thing to portray as well, and that's also a good place for character development. Maybe like you said with Big Bag RPG, Abraham, like maybe it doesn't start really religious, maybe it become more, maybe become less, maybe he lose faith in the god, maybe he get angry with it. You know, you can have all kind of thing. Like that's a very fertile ground to role play and to explore.
And that
every
can
every
also-
character's got to have character arcs. You know, these are character arcs. You know, the spirituality thing. You know, the learning. You know, how to become powerful, and then suddenly realizing, hey, this isn't it all. You know, and maybe there is some sort of arcs that you can integrate into all these players. But it takes takes all the players to kind of realize this in the game master to
that
influence
can
it
also
all.
be the downfall of certain settings, because I don't know if you know the role-playing game Scion from how you call this, the not White Wolf, Onyx Path Publishing. It has this Scion role-playing game where you're basically playing as either the children or the chosen one of gods, but you have gods walking the earth. You have Zeus and Poseidon and Carnoon, all of any god that you can basically imagine, even Lovecraftian deities. But then some people say, if you have gods like basically drinking their favorite beverage right over there in that restaurant or whatever, why would you have religions apart from those gods? Why would you have Muslims or Christians, or because they basically do not objectively, you cannot verify that, but here you have Zeus that basically gives you the power of thunder, and you start throwing thunders. So they say they need to find a way to rationalize that within the setting.
Yeah, well, you could have like gods other than those one, because like you can know that other people, you can assume that other people than the people you know exist. You know what I mean? Like even if I can assume that somebody in a different continent exists even though I never met him. So that's the one way. Like maybe there's other god in different land. And also like when you do like that's something that, because we're so influenced by like Christianity in this, that we often forget that the view that the people had of those gods was much different than what we have now. Like because even those gods, they had something, and that's true on a lot of the polytheistic religion. They often have like something above them. Oftentimes something that's not very that is very nondescript, like some kind of like cosmic force, some kind of like other god. They can be like you look at the Viking god that we are familiar of, but they were also like another family of god. There was like and there was a Jotun that was like of equivalent power, and then there was like this cosmic cow that licked a block of salt, and there was Yggdrasil that would link the different realms together. There was other thing than the gods. The gods were, they're not the same thing. They're not the god in the same way that the Christian god is. And even in Hinduism, you have like those avatar of a god that is dreaming and going different, like I'm not an expert in religion, but like going those different phases where at some point he's going to be Vishnu, at some point he's going to be like Shiva, at some point he's going to be Brahma, and but they're all like personification of this other god, like superior god in a way. So it's something that like people oftentimes have a vision of like very modern day vision of of what gods, and even like I said, like with Christianity, but even like the view that modern Christian view ancient gods is not the same as ancient Christian used to see it as well.
Yes, but when you're talking about the real context, because in that fictional role-playing game, if you basically ask for Zeus' power and you're my chosen one, he's going to give you thunder and lightning and whatnot. So if you wanted to have like prophets or cult leaders or anything, you will have to integrate them into the pantheon, because otherwise they're going to be like, Jesus, please give me the ability to throw crosses or something, whatever. And suddenly you don't obtain anything, and you're like, Jesus, you have failed me. Look at Zeus, he gives his followers thunder, and then you don't give me anything. Yeah, look, tossing nails or something, or secret blood.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that can be
he can walk on water.
You need to come up with some of those things, because otherwise they're going to be like, well, I'm going to the other team.
That's something I find like I'll
oh no. Evil technology again. Elon Musk, damn you, long scum.
And that's that's why I like this, the Harn, is because it delves into a lot more. There are religions in there, and they do have rituals. They do have all these kind of like monthly things that they need to do in order to appease the gods and stuff like that. And that's what seems to be missing in a lot of like the D&D kind of stuff. You're not seeing a lot of this. How do you appease whatever
yeah, and that's
the god.
That's one of the things I like about Pathfinder's setting is, as like kind of crazy high fantasy as it can get at times, they'll release just an entire book that is just faiths of the gods, and that's it. That's and it might include a little bit of mechanic stuff. Sometimes people hyperfixate. A lot of times people hyperfixate on the mechanics of Pathfinder and forget that there's a lot of just flavor baked into that setting that is there. And going back to advancement, you can get into sort of tricky situations where, because we don't know what level there are, maybe someone thinks one god is way more powerful than another because they see their axe through a level 17 cleric, and they only see the axe of this other god through a level 5 cleric. And so that shapes their worldview of like, oh, why would I worship that god? All you can do is create some water. That guy can perform actual miracles. That guy can, he's healing the sick instantly, no catch. Like, what,
Makes you think.
Moving into a more general approach of character leveling up and development and all of that, I think that many stories in movies and comic books also recognize these things. Because when I was talking about Elric remembering things, I thought, but it doesn't even need to be that over the top. I imagine that the three of you have watched the film Bloodsport.
Yes.
With Van Damme, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Do you remember that scene when he's fighting this? It's the actor playing Bolo in Enter the Dragon, but the bad guy. And he, that he blinds him, tossing this powder into his eyes. And he's kind of like, whoa, like he can't see.
Yeah.
He starts to remember the teachings of his master. And when he was like blind fighting, blindfolded. I think that's another cool way of representing when you remember something and suddenly you obtain the blind fighting feat or whatever.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's something that you can, once again, Game Master must be able to pull from these ideas and implement them for the player to kind of, oh yes, now I remain calm, and and then your player can play that and realizing, yes, he can try this technique of blind fighting, and it's a cool thing that. Well, once again,
because when you were talking earlier, about Elric, and I thought like, that could be a cool idea and stuff like that. I thought like, well, but that it would work well for one character. When you have a party character, you kind of have to find a gimmick to justify that. And I think like that Tyler with this prison thing kind of got a good one there. That's a one to remember, I guess. Yeah, because it's always like sometimes like something that would work for one character can become a bit silly if you try to apply it to 4, 5, or 6 character.
Like in the role-playing game Exalted. Have you played Exalted?
No.
I know well, it's one of the White Wolf games, currently on their Onyx path. Basically, all the player characters are reincarnations of legendary or mythical heroes. So even though they start out pretty weak, they're actually kind of like remembering, oh, in my past life, I was able to do this, and now you obtain the 1,000 arrows shot or who knows what. Sort of like that.
Yeah, if there's a justification for it, like, that's cool. That's it's an interesting, different way, an interesting way to go about it.
I like I like when players do take they make choices when they level up based on things they failed at. So it's like maybe in a Shadowrun game, for example, you have the issue of you're sitting around trying to hack this computer, and you realize that you look around and you're like, damn, do really none of us know how computers work? And I'll just try bashing it open, and then sets off the security system. And then when they
The
go
files
back,
are
like,
inside the computer.
yeah. When they go back, they're like, all right, I'm gonna go, hit the books, figure out how computers work, and then that's them putting points into, hacking or, just general computer knowledge or whatever.
I like also system where you get better at a skill by using it.
I don't think you should restrict yourself with whatever system you're using. You like use these as guidelines. That's what I always look at it is with Traveler, with kind of like a second edition kind of D&D kind of stuff. It's all guidelines. So it's up to you as the game master to kind of create the rules that that involve all this. You could have that spirituality thing coming through as an advancement, or you could have whatever you feel like that is proper for the advancement in the flavor of your game in order to make it very feasible. Once your players grab onto what you're getting to, how the advancement works, they'll go with it. If they feel that, oh yeah, this is a cool idea, there's no reason why you have to restrict yourself with all the the stringent rules of each type of game that you're playing. You just use it as a guideline. That's how I feel about all these rule books and everything.
Going off of that
from stuff, yeah.
Yeah, going off of that, Rick, how do you feel about like the XP versus milestone debate?
It depends on what your milestones. So, are you talking like when you're playing through, you go through a certain amount of stuff, and then it's you're a new level kind of idea.
Or you complete a quest.
Complete a quest. It depends, if that's how your flavor of the game is going to go, continue on with that. You have to have that continuity throughout your whole entire, like if you're playing a campaign, make sure it continues on through the campaign as that's how the goal, that's how you obtain your, levels. But if you're going to go ahead and do the XP thing, keep it XP all the way through. You may as well, if that's how you're going to do it. To me, it depends on how the game is. Traveler is totally different than any of these level up games. So, to me, it's more about the character arcs and stuff, and the dynamics between the party, and that's where all the story and everything comes from. It's not from the rules in the book dictating. This is what happens or whatever,
Funny enough, in my Ravenhawk campaign, we have both experience and milestones. That's part of the Curse of Strahd campaign. It tells you they're going to obtain experience points, but when they defeat this guy or when they reach this other place, they're going to level up. Max, what do you think about experience points, milestones?
I think oftentimes, like especially in level base, usually experience points come with level based game because you have a certain threshold to pass, and I think it can sometimes lead to monster of the week type of campaign, which are not my favorite, like constant dungeon delving, because you need to grind those experience points, and at some point I find like I prefer, like as a GM, be able to control the rhythm of the campaign a bit more, like say like, you're going into dungeon facing those monsters. We told that story already. Let's see what's happening next to the character. You know what I mean? When I run a campaign, I often do like a lot of like time jump and stuff like that. Like, because we're telling the story of those characters, what's happening to their life and stuff like that. We're discovering it. There's no story pre-written, but we're figuring out what it is by true play. And
oh no,
I'll never know.
needs to level up his computer.
At some point, they would show you like, okay, the characters do that, and then they would be like, now we're in a different part of his life where you do something else. So I think that's, I don't like when I don't want to do like 6 months of like, you go in a dungeon, kill some monster, take some loot. Oh, now there's slightly stronger monster. Oh, now even like, this, at some point it becomes too samey for me. So just let's move the story forward. Like let's so I guess in that sense I would be more to the milestone kind of side. But I don't tend to play a lot of like level based games, so that's not really like a concern for me.
In Pendragon, what's the level up system?
There's like in Pendragon, there's a very like it's expected that you're gonna do one adventure per year, because healing takes a long time, and you have other duties as a knight. So you're gonna do an adventure during the summer. You're gonna go into some quest or something, or do maybe some battle, and then you're gonna go to your manor for the winter. You have to take care of your business. So times go pretty fast, and you can train during the winter, and you can like put check on skill that you use or that you during the game, and then you can test them. So maybe they're gonna increase by 1 point, maybe not. It's a role that you have to do, and the higher level, the harder it is to increase them. But it all happens during the winter. So like, because there's this big time gap between adventure, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel too gamey. Like, it kind of makes sense, and also your character age and his stats decrease with time. Like, because there's a lot of time gap, it's expected at some point your character is going to retire. It's going to be too old to adventure and stuff like that. So now hopefully you manage to get an heir, and now you're going to play as the son. So that's how it manage it, which is also a system I quite like. I really like this going through the life of the character pretty, like, in a way pretty fast, because like if you do 1 year per, and sometimes you can even skip 2 years, like, oh, nothing special happened on this summer, so you can pass through character, like, and you explore the whole life. I think
it's more realistic. It's kind of like I hear what some people say. I took 2 years of Taekwondo. I am now a martial artist, but you need a long time to develop that. Or the typical in role-playing games. I have been playing tabletop role-playing games for 40 years, and they can't. Since I was inside my mother's womb, and they can't role-play shit. Excuse me, but yeah, they can't role-play. Yeah, but it's quite similar. I think we've covered a lot. Do you have any like closing thoughts before we end this discussion?
The only closing thought I would have, like, is the same kind of like my opening thought. Like, it's like because I think that's often what came back in this conversation as well. I think it was a very interesting conversation. I thank you again, Abraham, for having me. And despite my internet problem, I guess it was annoying. But I think I would always say, like, look at the more than character advancement, look at character development, and look further than just what's.
The technology got mad at him because he commented on that.
He's telling the truth.
Well, while there we go. Okay.
That's it. Try to look at your character as a person, as a complete person, not just like an array of stats and power and stuff like that. Like, think about his desire, his experience. Like try to put yourself in the mindset of the character. Or consider the thing you went through, and include that in your role play. I think that's an important part of depicting a character.
Yeah, and in those systems that do have really robust, level 1 through 20 or whatever progression systems, you have to constantly keep in mind that your role play choices are informing what choices you make as you when you get those level ups. Likewise, when you get those level ups, that might inform how you roleplay your character. So they feed into each other. You can't think of them as two separate, things. That the character growing as a character and the mechanics of that character, they grow together, or at least they should.
The game master, once again, game master, players, they must work as one, basically, with however they've developed their setting from their session 0, and how they want to portray the flavor of the game. it takes both sides to go ahead and make that reality become something that's very dynamic and becomes, character arcs and, conflicts that get resolved, over time by, opposing parts of the player group even. And but that's the thing, it's got to take, it's just not one end, the players or the game master. It's got to be the players and the game masters working together to make the reality cohesive and feel dynamic that way. That's how I feel, anyways.
Mm-hmm. I think on my part, I would encourage everyone to handle character advancement, development, growth, however they like, with their favorite systems, with their favorite settings, and to become inspired with things in real life and in fiction. Like I said, Doc Holliday, he wasn't instantaneously like that. He had a long career until he became that incredible gunfighter. In Miyamoto Musashi from Japan, he started to wield a katana. He was so good later on that he would not wield a katana. He was always defeating his opponents with sticks.
Yeah.
That's how
And
good he
at
was.
some point, it became like invested in calligraphy.
Yeah.
He
There's a
moved away
lot
from the
when it
sword
comes
fighting.
to character development, even besides sword fighting, calligraphy, exactly. And in fiction, just take a look at the Karate Kid. He started out fighting terrible, and he leveled up until the very end. Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, farm boy that got his ass handed to him by Tusken Raiders, and in Return of the Jedi, he was basically with a gesture pushing the Gamorrean guards from Jabba the Hutt. You can represent all of those cool situations as long as you role play and you remember that your character is not like a set of stats, like Max said. It's not a set of stats. It's a real character, and you're supposed to be living the life of that character. That's the magic of role playing. But yes, definitely, as always, thank you to everyone who has been watching this video. I hope you found it informative and entertaining. Let us know your comments in the comment section below. And thank you so much to Max, to Tyler, to Rick for being here. This video was only possible because of you. Thank you. And I'm going to stop recording in 10 seconds, but before we leave, remember, there is no place for stupidity in tabletop role-playing games unless you are role-playing as a stupid character. I'm going to stop recording.